Hello, NASCAR fans. Welcome to our weekly on pit road NASCAR race sprint cup race rewind. This time for the big race at Richmond International Speedway on Saturday night. Kind of a big anticlimactic race, I think. Dan and I were chatting about the Dan being Dan Beaver. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Me too. And we chatted a little bit before we went live here, just kind of to, I don't know, root out the big stories from the race. I think the big story was that it was kind of, I guess, anticlimactic. We did not have the big rush to win for the win by guys who had to get the win to get into the chase. We didn't really have anybody try to play the teammate game like they did last year at this race, which maybe cost the whole race team a lot. But it was an impressive run by Brad Keselowski. Let's start there.
Yeah, it was about as close to perfect as you get.
Yeah.
I guess he avoided getting the perfect driver rating by not leading the 17 laps that Kevin Harvick somehow managed to lead. It was the kind of dominance that you just usually don't see in NASCAR. And it's not that the other driver, if Keselowski had been removed from the equation, I suspect that the battle between Gordon, Boyer, and McMurray would have been much more intense than it was. Really wasn't as much of a reason to fight hard for second place
Right.
as it would have been to fight for the lead. And I think that would have impacted how difficult Boyer was to get around in those closing laps for Jeff Gordon.
Yeah, and Boyer might have had more of a reason to wreck somebody who was in front of him in first place than whoever was in front of him in second or third or whatever. So,
Yeah.
let me go down real quickly. I'll go down the top 10 in case you missed it. How could you miss the NASCAR race on Saturday night at Richmond? Of course, we said Brad Keselowski was the winner. Finishing second was Jeff Gordon. Clint Boyer came in third. Jamie McMurray with a good run in fourth. Kevin Harvick fifth was the one car that was able to get in front of Keselowski all night, but not for very long early in the race. Joey Logano was sixth. Kurt Busch seventh. Jimmy Johnson eighth. Ryan Newman ninth, and Eric Almirola in 10th. And the only guy in that top 10 who's not going to be chasing is Clint Boyer. Or no, I take it back, Jamie McMurray too. So two drivers up there.
Yeah, so you had that storyline going, and it kept the nice thing about the winning in formula is it kept the conversation going until the end. Keselowski's engine could have blown up. Morgan Shepherd could have dropped from the sky and wrecked him. Or the dude sitting on the fence in turn 4 could have dropped
That was probably
from the
story
sky and
of the
landed up.
race. Yeah.
So strange things happened, and it kept everything in question until the very end. And Boyer and McMurray had solid runs. Just they did all they could, and it just wasn't enough. And you're going to get that in any final regular season race, regardless of what the format is. You're going to get someone that's just racing their guts out to get in. And last year it was Martin Truex Jr., and he didn't realize that he'd missed until sometime later when NASCAR penalized everybody, penalized the Michael Waltrip teams. So it's part of it, and domination's part of it too. You get these races from time to time. But it's surprising that it happened at Richmond. This is one of the most exciting tracks, usually. Driver usually doesn't get that kind of setup that is prohibitive to the rest of the field. But you got the finishing order that you got, and you move on.
One thing that sort of surprised me a little bit was the fact that neither of the contending Roush Fenway drivers were able to get up and make any kind of dent in the top 5. I mean, Carl Edwards, I thought maybe would be a good pick here this week. In fact, I think I might have picked him. And Greg Biffle had, I would thought he would have been pretty good here, but nothing. And that does not bode well for those guys with the chase starting this week in Chicago.
Well, and the other big story there is Joe Gibbs Racing struggled across the board.
Yeah.
And they don't usually on short flat tracks. Denny Hamlin is one of the best. I had him picked to finish in the top 5, and he finished 2 laps off the pace and 21st. Kyle Busch never challenged for a top 5 really didn't challenge for a top 10, even though he had the best finish of all of them in 14th. And then Matt Kenseth, who's usually pretty much error-free, hits the wall racing for whatever little bit of advantage he could get and ends up some 60-plus laps off the pace making repairs in the garage. So it wasn't only just a atypical race for Roush Fenway, it was a much more atypical race, I think, for Joe Gibbs Racing. And there were other storylines, too. I think Kurt Busch finishing 7th is a big story, in part because it's the first time that he's finished in the top 5, but not in the top 10. To me, that suggests that he took what the car would give him, which is not his tendency. If he gets close to the front, he tends to either have a car that's dominant and will get him there, or he overdrives and tries to overcompensate for what the car will give, and he hits the wall and falls back. So the fact that he finished 7th, I think, bodes well for him. Kevin Harvick finishing 5th, I think, was another good storyline because it's the first time that they made mistakes on getting the setup. They had a long-run car. They tried to make it a short-run car. It didn't work. They lost the long run as well as the short run. But they didn't make a mistake in the pits. The driver didn't make a mistake. And I think it's one reason that he was battling Joey Logano so hard for that 5th place spot late in the race. So there, I think we've got another good story. And then finally, Eric Almirola. This is the first time all year that he's, I think it's the second time all year that he's posted back-to-back top 10 finishes. So it's not enough to make them contenders for the chase, but it's enough to make them make fans stand up and take notice.
Well, maybe be contenders. Well, at least maybe to be contenders to get through the first 3 races and still be, one of the top 12. I think that's what's encouraging about those last 2 weeks for those guys.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's more likely means that they're not going to. I don't use the word embarrass themselves, but they're actually going to be noticeable during the chase. I don't know that they're going to advance. I wouldn't predict that. Any of the drivers that got there just based on restrictor plate or a road course win, I don't think have a good chance at advancing. So I put him in that category along with Hamlin and Allmendinger.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about this coming race when we get to the on-pit row hangout. What else did you see that's notable to comment about it at this race at Richmond? We got lucky with the weather. It was the second race in a row. The thing is kind of weird. Second race in a row where the coverage spent a lot of time talking about something that happened that had nothing to do with the race. In this case, the guy who was climbing on top of the fence. Last week it was ended up being a cat, not a squirrel, apparently, that was let loose at where were we last week? I forget already.
Atlanta. And I think it was the other way around. They thought it was a cat, ended up being a squirrel. So NASCAR's been upstaged by, if that was the case, NASCAR's been upstaged by squirrels in 2 races. One running across the track, one sitting on top of the fence.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that guy's out yet.
The picture of him sitting up there, though, is classic. The dude was just flat out chilling.
It was just hard to believe that he could get that far without them stopping the race before that. I mean, it's just hard to explain, people. But anyway,
I actually wonder how long he had been sitting up there before someone noticed, because he looked casual.
He did look like he was chilling out. He'd just have his 6-pack cooler up there, just enjoying the race. That'd be a pretty good vantage point, I guess. But
yeah.
I don't know. All right. Well, we go to Chicagoland. We go back to a similarly configured 1.5-mile track.
Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
I've been practicing that all weekend. As you can tell, I haven't got it very good. What I have left of my voice, we'll talk about that on the live on pit row hangout shortly. But anything else? I always figured that this is going to be a race where there's going to be tons of things to talk about, tons of passing. This time there just wasn't much.
No, there wasn't. I think Kyle Larson bears mentioning. He finished 11th, and the way NASCAR's rookie point systems works at this stage, they start to drop out that the lowest finish and add the best finish in, and then you get a point, I think, for attempting each race. And it's notable that Larson didn't improve his points total in the rookie standing last week by more than just that one point. So that means that his 11th place finish is right there on the cusp of one of his best 17 races. And for a rookie to say that they've got that many, I think he's got, what does he have? Is it 11 top 10s? I think he's got 11 top 10s.
Something like that, yeah.
So he didn't make the chase. That's a little disappointing because you like to kind of root for storylines like that. But he's definitely the best rookie we've seen in maybe since Logano, probably since Logano.
You think he has, now that they're resetting this thing and we have a whole chase point system to find the championship, do you think Larson, somebody like Larson or Tony Stewart or one of these guys who hasn't won a race yet this year and is not in the chase can sneak in and win one of these last 10?
Someone always does. Someone's got something to prove. Last year in the final 10 races, actually back up one step there. Usually you get one driver, maybe two drivers that win a race in the chase that are not chase contenders. I think the average is like 1.2, 1.3. Last year we had three. So we had McMurray, Hamlin, and don't remember who the other guy was, but there were three non-chasers that won races. One of those was at Talladega, but the others were in races where you would expect flat-out contenders to run. So yeah, someone will. And as we start knocking drivers out, they've got something to prove. So whoever doesn't advance from the challenger to the contender round, once we get to the contender round, they're going to be battling hard for a victory just to prove that had they been there, they would have continued to advance and they belonged there, if not for whatever excuse they've got for the first three races. So I think this win and end formula can continue to impact us, although now we're back to a point where points matter. So Brad Keselowski's victory is important at Richmond, but Jeff Gordon's second place finish I think is equally important, and Kevin Harvick's fifth place finish is equally important because it proves that they can make that shift from winning to earning points, and that's going to get 63% of the drivers advancing from one round to the next over the next 10 races.
All right, he's Dan Beaver, and we'll be back next week to talk about the results of the big first chase race of 2014 at Chicagoland Speedway. I'm Charlie Turner. You can follow me on Twitter at onpitrow. Follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race and read all of his fantasy racing articles at yahoosports.com and rotoworld.com. There we go. I'll get it one of these days. All right, so thanks, Dan. We'll talk again soon.
Look forward to it.